Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this week's Visas.AI attorney collab. Today's November 10th. I'm joined by some wonderful attorneys and non attorneys, including myself. I'd love to get today's collab started by giving the mic to Jon Velie. John, thanks for joining. You are the founder of Visas.AI, the CEO, and then also an immigration attorney, 30 years and counting. Can you tell us a little bit about how your week has been and what are some fun cases you're working on? We don't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Thanks, Pierre. It's good to be here, and nice to meet you, Diana. Good to see you, Yesh, Gabby, John, Emma. Yeah, we went from one wave to another. Right now, we represent a number of teams in professional sports, in particular Major League Rugby, and a lot of visas are going out. We do P visas for them, some O's, right? So P's are for professional athletes. O's are for either anybody that's extraordinary, so coaches can go there, players can go there as well. And it's an interesting time on whether or not we're going to use the international recognition standard under the P or the professional athlete standard under the P. The latter requires the league to have combined revenues of over 10 million. And if they do that, then it lowers the standard for the athlete they can sign. So Major League Baseball, the Big Four, football, hockey, basketball, they actually can hire a lesser level of athlete than the sports that make less than that. Ironically, what they're really doing is giving the benefit to the sport to hire who they want. If the sport isn't that large, then they have to prove that they're internationally recognized through hitting a number of criteria. So we've gotten some new news on that. It's an interesting thing. We've seen an AAO decision that may make merely stating that you make it not good enough, that you have to show the taxes and things like that, which we're not surprised about. So we're dealing with our athletes in the league, I'm sure our teams in the league to talk about how to address that. So that's really the biggest news we have, in addition to just looking at different elements. Interesting asylum case came in, and just large array of things.
Wonderful. That sounds exciting. Any developments on US CIS's side? Has there been anything new this week that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I think what we heard is still a rumor. Yes, you can probably help us with this, but it looks like there'll be a third wave of H-1Bs coming through. We should hear, I got in the next few days, right? On whether that'll happen or not, and how many, right? So
Right.
to give a little background on that, sometimes we can get in the weeds, and anybody's listening that doesn't, think and eat, sleep H-1Bs like Yesh does. We would it's There's a numeric cap. There are 65,000 H-1Bs available across all professions for the year. That year starts October 1st. You can file 6 months earlier, and then a month before that, there's a lottery. So people have filed the lottery in March to start that processing in April. And what happened is when they gave you 90 days to file. So at the end of that filing period, out of the um, largest number of registrants ever, we had a very, very small number of people file. And so there were 77,000 available out of the full 85,000, 65 plus another 20 for master's degree, 77,000 still available. So that went to the second wave. The second wave came to an end because its 90 days ended at the end of last month, October 31st. So sometime here in November, they'll say there's now so many more. We don't know what that number will be. So out of the 77 that they opened up, how many were not filed? The issue du jour has been double registrations, and that has scared off a lot of filers. We've talked about that a lot on this show. But double registrations is when a company files for more than one, and USCIS has been making findings of fraud against companies that have done that, and we're battling some of those battles right now. Matter of fact, we may be litigating one here shortly, probably executing that deal this week. So
Very good.
that's news from USCIS from that I know. I'm sure there's more.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Well, I'd love to introduce today's spotlight guest. Lady Diana Diaz Tamayo. She immigrated to Arizona from Colombia back in 2014 on a fiancé visa, actually, and then she became a US citizen in 2021. She then became a certified immigration forms preparer, and now she helps people like her navigate the path to US citizenship. She actually, surprisingly, really cool. On the side, she runs a cleaning company to help asylum seekers and legal immigrants create a reliable source of income to support their new life in the US, which we constantly speak about is always challenging, especially in the beginning. Diana, welcome to today's collab. I'd love to give you the space to tell us a little bit about what you do and what drew you to the field of immigration after you've done your process.
Okay, thank you. Hello to everyone. Yes. Well, let me tell you a little more about my story and how I got where I am today. I came here almost 10 years ago by now. I came here, like he said, Pierre said, I came here about with the Fiancé Visa. And later I came a permanent resident. And after that, I was learning more about the American culture and learning something else is not only hamburgers, it's something more to the culture. So I started watching TV shows, about American culture. I went with my husband to Boston. We walked to the free trail and see how everything happened right there. And that helped me to learn the 100 civic questions later to become a US citizen. The American passport is just so amazing that I can have it and how I can help other people to get that dreams. Because it's thousands of people around the world who want to come here and I like help them to be legal. And some people are here and they are kind of like, what is my next step? Or maybe they cannot afford it to go to the lawyer. So I try to help them too. So I got involved in church where I can see more Latin people and I become friends and I start helping them first. And then I say, it's interesting how I can learn things all the law and immigration so I can help in them too. So I take English classes because obviously English is my second language. I'm not getting yeah in there for sure the second, but I'm trying hard to work in the language and try to help people in different language, not only Latins, because it's thousand people from around the world here to speak different language. I'm
Very good.
happy I can
That's
help
very
them.
good. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's funny that you bring up languages because it's really a big discussion on this weekly collab. We were speaking last week about technology. So for those of you that don't know, Visas.ai is a revolutionary, first of its kind immigration platform that basically creates a bridge for the applicants themselves, not just for the attorneys, but for the applicants, not just for the attorneys, but also for the case preparers, the paralegals, the case managers. I think language is really, really important, right? Because we know that not every person applying speaks English. So that's the really cool introduction of the new languages. I'll get right back into our conversation, but I think it's a great insert for us to talk a little bit about language. So, Gabby, if I can ask you, what languages does Visas.ai currently support forms wise?
Well, we just integrated with Google Translate, so now we have the ability to translate into hundreds of languages. I don't even know the official number, but hundreds of languages and dialects now. You can select the foreign nationals' native tongue, and then it will translate all the questions they're seeing on their side into their language so they can kind of more easily understand how the questions flow
So if
in
Diana
English.
is using Visas.ai to help, let's say, a marriage visa applicant, and they're from Ukraine and they speak Ukrainian, she'll be able to show them the forms in
Yeah, for
Ukrainian.
sure. I can help in them.
She would be able to show them the questions that feed into the forms. We wouldn't translate the PDF of the form, but as she's going through the
Right.
questions with her client, we can change it into their language and they can kind of follow along with you as you're going through.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, because at the end of the day, of course, USCIS needs it in English. So that's why you're only translating the front end, not the final form. That's cool. Diana, could we? I'd love to ask you if you could share with us a notable case from your experience in the last few years that you want to share with us. Maybe your favorite case that had a lasting impression on you.
I think it's going to be an asylum claim. We just recently got granted from the judge. It just thousands of people came here illegally, right, to apply for asylum, and maybe one of 1,000 they have a real claim. And Livy, the asylum claims is already like you walk to the court and the case is lost. So you had to make good arguments to win the case, to present themselves. And you talking about just not a case, it's just live people here. And in this case, we got here, my husband is a lawyer, so he represents these clients. They came to me and we walked through to the process. We went to the court, the judge granted the asylum. When they hug me, I can feel, I mean, obviously everything happened inside there, that court in that second. I was holding myself and kind of help my husband to go through to the process. And when the judge said I grant the asylum, I was like feeling back in the time when I went to the embassy in Colombia and they say, yes, you are allowed to go to the US. I was like, what? They say yes or they say no here.
Wow.
So, and then I saw my clients and they are so happy and they hug me like I never got a hug before. I was feeling in my heart and I was feeling how they crying and they so happy to be part of the American culture and finally have the paperwork actually to go to work. They have two childrens. One is like 5 and then the oldest was 10 years old and they came from Venezuela and I know how things are over there, right? And I was so happy that we can change their life and they can have better life here. Since they're so young, they can learn the culture more quickly and the language and emerge into this country, who is the beautiful country. To me, is the best country ever.
That's
So I
awesome.
was really happy that that happened to that family, and we were part of that process.
Fantastic. Thanks for that story. Yeah, it's beautiful. I want to open it up to John and Yesh. If you guys have questions about this case and other questions for Diana.
Good. Yes.
Well, I don't have a question. I actually just want to add to it. A lot of the times, you see the attorneys that get a lot of the credit for the asylum cases or the cases that we handle, because we're the ones that submit it with our licenses. But a chunk of the work is done by case managers, and a chunk of work or communication is the case managers, the paralegals that handle the case and talk to these clients day to day just to get documentation and all of that. So I love how this is not the portal is not just for attorneys, but it's also a majority of it is what case managers and paralegals would be doing or would be using. So that was my thoughts to add on it. So it's not just the attorneys that have, all of these favorite cases that they worked on. You also have input and a lot of support from the support staff as well.
Yes. Yeah, it's very true. A lot of the communication is done, as most of you know. I'm currently in an active immigration case, and it's really interesting because I get to speak to my attorney on strategy and overall the big picture, but the small details and the ins and outs are done with your case manager, case preparer, case paralegal, whatever they specifically call themselves. But one of the cool things about it is that really you're trying to explain as a petitioner, you're constantly trying to explain to the case manager, because when they do understand your case, then they can better communicate it to an attorney, especially if you need to go to court. That's very cool. I really like the asylum case. We don't usually speak about asylum on here, but it's always really cool to bring in new visa types. John, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I just got a really interesting asylum case this week for a guy that it's interesting because he's been here. He tried to do another visa, and while he was here, his country's power changed, and he was a famous musician in his country, and the incumbents were using his music. And then when they lost, a guy that was part of his that he produced disappeared and died at the hands of the opposition. And then while he was here, he became the enemy, right? And so it's an interesting thing because in asylum cases, Diana, we have 1 year to file these things. His year just ended, but while he was here, it changed, right? His situation changed, and it really the election happened in October, but that wasn't even immediate, right? So if it had happened in October, we'd still be outside a year. But it started happening in January and February that his music became sort of the sign or image or sounds of the opposition, and the new leadership wants to make an example of him. So he would likely die if he goes back to his country. And unfortunately for him, he was denied the visa he attempted to do. So we have an interesting asylum case to file on that. And that was fun to learn about. I would like to ask you a question about your practice. So it sounds like you work hand in hand with your husband, who's the attorney. So tell us a little bit about how he is the attorney and you as the case manager or forms filer, as you called yourself. How do you guys work in connection with each other?
So, what I said before, I came here because I met him in Colombia. He
Mm,
was already a lawyer. I was a engineer college in that moment.
mm,
And when I moved here, everything just changed to your life because you open your eyes that you have not only one opportunity now, you have
mm,
thousand opportunity and
sure.
where you want to go. So I choose immigration at that point because my family and because close friends, they need it. Maybe
Yeah.
they have a case but they don't know, and they are scared to ask a lawyer or somebody else about their status. So I start taking classes in different college in Miami, in different groups, and I start learning a little more about the law and immigration law.
Mm,
And at one point, I said, "Well, my husband had no idea immigration because he totally have different paths. He is an IRS and business lawyer." And then I started studying immigration, and I started working with him in my classes, talking about different
great.
cases and how he can apply what his knowledge is
Mhm.
into those cases. And that's how he became involved in this situation. And
Nice.
also, my cousin came here by asylum, so he started helping me. I did the forms and everything, but at one point you need that lawyer because he need to go to the court.
That's right.
So I start making him involved, and he start learning a little more about immigration. And plus, I feel like my husband is super smart, so he got involved in immigration law super quick, and that's how we work together here.
I like that. It's a neat thing. So a normal way is for an attorney to get case managers to help work on cases. There's nothing wrong
Mhm.
with you finding opportunities and bringing it to the lawyer and having the lawyer execute that. And especially if you're in the community, and it sounds like you're not only helping them with, along the way with the forms, introducing them to the attorney, making them feel comfortable, but also sounds like you're doing some things to find work for them,
Yes.
so that they can support themselves. And that's what we need is all of those things. with our platform, what we did that's a little bit different is what the other packages that are only forms packages, right? So all the other immigration packages out there are they're case management systems, but they build forms, and that's what they do. We found that the forms by themselves was insufficient because we were subscribers to those packages too. And we found that the cases were one with briefs, right? So the asylum case is one with a brief, but so is the EB1, so is the O1, the L, all of those things. There are arguments that need to be made, and those arguments need to look at the law. And the law could be a regulation, it could be a memo, it could be an AAO decision or a PALCA decision for the perms, and it could be a federal case law. Now, what immigration wants us to do is just give them stuff and to interpret it, right? But that's not being a very good lawyer. What a lawyer should be doing is educating them, instructing them, reminding them that they know what the law is, they know what the parameters are, and that they can give them the evidence as supported by experts what's necessary and how to apply that evidence to the law, and not just, here you go, immigration, you tell us what's up, right? That's what lawyers do. But what we've done with our thing by creating with our platform, Visas.ai, is we've carved out strategy questions. So the attorney, you can bring your friends and people you meet to your husband to do an evaluation. And then we've carved out the strategic questions for asylum cases, right? We've carved out the strategic questions for 50 plus visas. So you can go through, see with the facts how that meets the law or not. And then once the attorney kind of signs off on the strategy, right, then the forms filers, the paralegals or case managers, whatever we want to call those professionals, would then execute that plan, right? And so what we're able to do is execute it across a large number of people, across a large number of visas. And that's what is interesting for us. And what we're able to do is that attorney and that case manager don't need to be sitting office to office. They can be in different countries. They can be in different cities. It's just by using a cloud-based platform, you can find that stuff out and then be able to execute that strategy and have whoever come back in whenever they need to make whatever judgment calls they need to make sure that it goes on, appropriately.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's very, very interesting. Diana, do you have any questions about what John is talking about specifically, like the actual platform? Have you heard of Visas.ai before?
No, I didn't.
Awesome. Well, then today is the first time.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So I think the reason why I'm personally passionate about it is because I did my case through it. So think about almost like communication that you would do on WhatsApp or wherever you and your clients communicate. This would be instead you can give your clients what in whatever part of the journey they are, whether it's the beginning or halfway through, almost logins that they can go to, and they have a portal now, and the system automatically knows what visa you're going to file when because you're going to tell it what visa you're going to file, and then it will show all these forms and documents checklist to the clients that you can fill out if they send it to you, but then the client themselves can fill out. To me, it made my process easier because it told me like, okay, it's like a game basically. This is where I am, this is what I need, this is what I'm gonna need. So I was able to plan getting all the documents and information. But I do have another question that came up. So you mentioned that some people out of status or maybe out of status are scared to go to an attorney to ask. Why is that? Is it, John, is it, are attorneys required to report people out of status? Is it, why are people scared to speak to attorneys?
I'll try to answer, and then I'd like to hear Diana's answer because they may be a little bit different. Yeah, I think there's something there, Pierre. I think that especially people coming from other cultures, if say the lawyer's not of the same culture, maybe doesn't speak the same language, a lot of people are going to kind of think everybody's against them, right? That they don't know the distinction between a prosecutor and a helper, right? I mean, we see that in America where there's not a cultural difference. People that get in trouble with the law, they don't know the distinction between attorneys that would protect them and prosecutors that would prosecute them, and so they kind of think everybody's against them, right? So that may be in there. I don't know, but attorneys are bound by confidentiality, right? So we're either going to help you or not help you, but we're not going to say, hey, somebody came into my office and said they broke a law and then call somebody. It's against the law for us to do that. Now, conversely, we can't help people do it. So if someone says to me, this is the classic one, hey, I've got somebody that says they'll marry me, but I'm not really going to marry them. It's not real. Will you help me? I'll say no to that every time, right? But there are other instances where they've been dating for a while. Maybe they had a visa denied, or they've worked illegally or whatever. And then they're in a relationship and they want to expedite that relationship because they know if they don't, that they're going to have to separate, right?
Yeah.
And so it's our job to tell them what the law is. The law is if you're married to an American citizen, now that means you've entered lawfully, right? You can't sneak across the border and have that benefit without doing another waiver that can make that permissible. But if you've entered on a visitor visa or some other visa and you've overstayed or worked illegally, one visa that will forgive those scenarios is a married to a US citizen. Now, because of that, it's the most fraudulent visa. And that's why they have interviews and they look you in the eye and things like that. But there are instances where people that are in love that would get married would expedite that process because of an immigration issue. And they're afraid to talk about that sometimes. Another visa, yes, maybe you can talk about that, is the U visa, right? Where you can have been in an unauthorized process. And then if you're a victim of a crime, be able to file for a U visa. And if you help the prosecution of that crime, then you can end up with a legal status in the United States. And so what I think will go, and maybe we can have Diana tell us her aspect on why people are afraid of talking to attorneys. I think sometimes, one, they'll think we're too expensive to talk to. Two, they think that we're going to scold them possibly, or we're part of the problem, or we're out to get them, or whatever, right? Those are things that jump to my mind. I don't know, because if they're not talking to me, I'm not talking to them, and they're not telling me that. But Diana, you're helping people that are afraid. What are some of the reasons you see that they're afraid to come to lawyers for help?
Well, first, remember that these people come usually for small towns for the countries. So
Right.
those small towns, you can drive without a driver license. You learn to drive, you're free to go. So when they came here, they noticed that everything changed. Here, you had to follow the law, leaving know if you already broke the law from the beginning.
Mm.
So that's one point, because when they talk with lawyers, they think, okay, he going to help me, or he going to find the way to tell immigration I'm here. He
Right.
lied me, he want me here, or he don't.
Right.
That's one of the reasons. The most popular reason I hear is they pay a lot of money to the lawyer and they have not done the job.
Right.
So they got no status. They pay $5,000 or $10,000.
Right.
From the beginning they don't have, because they don't have any status.
You're
So
100% right.
that's
Unfortunately, there's tens of millions of people in this country that are not authorized and can't be authorized, right? And if there are attorneys that they pay money to that can't help them, then they're scared of losing all that money. You're really actually providing a really nice service to kind of how to talk to an attorney, whether to talk to an attorney, and being able to kind of step in that role to say, look, I think you'd have a good shot. Well, maybe I can introduce you to your husband or whatever, who can do that for you. So that's a nice thing. There are people that try to do this without attorneys at all, and we see them. They can also prey upon people, right? The coyote, as they call them. We've seen some people go to them and they'll pay a lot of money, and there was never a shot. There was never anything for them to do, and they aren't bound by bar associations. They can't lose their licenses. They're working illegally themselves, right? So there are people that prey on folks out there, that way. I like in your situation that you can have those early conversations, assess whether or not they should go to an attorney or not, and then bring them to the attorney and then help them through that process. We see that a lot in our business in other cultures, right? We call them influencers, right? So we represent a lot of Indians in the tech sector, and there are people that are just maybe they've been to the process themselves. They will come and they'll bring people to us, like the influencers will, like people like you, Diana. They're like, hey, there's a good attorney I know. They will then stay in that relationship for the rest of the case, right? Or cases or series of cases, right? They're just sort of community leaders. They're trusted advisors, and they'll just say, hey, here's an attorney. And many times we won't speak the language, they will. So whatever we say, they'll be on the call too, and then they'll go back and they'll speak in their language and say, here's what they said and they meant. And those people are really valuable to this process. And we see it across a lot of visas, EB-5s, because there's a lot of money that's going into that. That's an $800,000 investment, and they're worried and they don't want to be ripped off, and they don't know B from Adam, as they say, right? So these trusted advisors will help them make those decisions there. So it's interesting. You've built a business model around this, and that's neat to see.
Yes.
Yes, you were. Was going to pull you into this. Sorry, that hadn't.
Oh, I was going to add that a lot of the times, if language barriers, if somebody speaks the language, you tend to be a little bit more comfortable to open up to them, especially in the initial, in the initial conversations. People tend to confide with you a little bit more if they can speak your language, because they don't have to worry about, are they being grammatically correct and stuff. And then with you, Ms. Diane, it's a good way for you to say, hey, there's somebody that, my husband can help you. And then you can take that case to your attorney. That way, you know, you're able to reach out to the community, but there's also that safe space, sort of, to say, where you can create that for your clients, and then they feel like they can reach out, or they can connect with you and the attorney in the next steps. So that's kind of cool what you guys have right now.
Thank
Yeah,
you. But
it really is.
I not only send the clients just to my husband because he is not like 100% in immigration.
Hmm.
So I have different lawyers who are my friends. So I
Good.
refer to them because I know they're going to do the best they can, because nobody can guarantee you going to
Hmm.
win. But
Right. It's not like you pay and then you get the status, but I do think that honestly, if you work with an attorney that has strategy, that has great case managers, paralegals, and I people have an impression that attorneys are overworked. I mean, any successful attorney is going to have a lot of cases, but that doesn't
Understood.
mean that they can't delegate, the necessary time and efforts to your case, because they're gonna have a great team. So that's for me what's been like the biggest surprise. It's always taking a bet, but if you do your research and you find an attorney that has a track record, right? Like John, we've covered your numbers before, but I think it's a 99% approval rate at the moment. Your
We're there.
firm,
Yeah.
that
Unfortunately, there's
it's
still
like
1% left, but that's immigration
so
for
that
you.
means like 99% of his cases are approved. That when a company is looking for employees, they do a background check or search or whatever. What's it called? Referrals. So it's the same thing with an attorney. But I think the also interesting conversation is that there's a lot of not really do it yourself, but more simpler visas that don't necessarily require you to go to court. And those visas, I'm assuming, Diana, that you file completely on your own, correct? For your client.
yes, yes,
And that is where I really think that Visas.ai shines, because I would love to see if maybe Gabby can show us some things now or later on in today's session. But I'd love if we can see an asylum case or anything on the back end of Visas.ai, just so that we can visualize for everyone watching what it looks like, both for Diana, both for John as an attorney, but also for the petitioner.
I could do that.
Well,
If you
Right.
want.
I've got it set up.
You got.
Yep.
Okay.
So I'm happy to share that. Thanks, Pierre, for kicking it over to me.
Yes, yes.
Just give me one.
Take your time.
All right. So, what I think is so beautiful about Visas AI is kind of to touch on what John was talking about. We've really carved out the essential questions that build strong foundation for the case. So, since we've been talking so much about asylum today, I thought I'd pull up our asylum questions that we have here. What's so great about this, and why I think it's perfect for someone like you, Diana, or if you bring somebody in who's less experienced to train under you, or just attorneys who have been away and they're coming back in, just need to refresh. Um, it kind of walks you through the whole process. And here we've got Ovi on the right, who is always offering descriptions. So, as a non-attorney, if I were to step in and help, I don't know the
Gabby, let me
difference
let me
between.
let me jump in for a second. An attorney should be doing this. Attorney should be doing this part of the deal. A non-attorney should bring this to an attorney. The attorney should take him through these questions and make these judgment calls on it. And then the non-attorney would then help execute that. We really got to be clear about that. It should not be done by an asylum case. Is not a simple case. These should be done with an attorney making these judgment calls, and Ovi's there to help them along those lines. So, step on
Thank you
your
for
toes.
clarifying that.
Yeah.
But as I was saying, it kind of walks you through. So if you have a newer attorney, and they don't, or they just kind of need reminders. What we've had is, we're bringing in an attorney and they're training with us. We found that they report this really helps them as they're with the client, kind of having reminders on the side. So here, this is telling us about, just kind of expands. Here's the question, but this expands on what are we specifically asking for, and here's some guidance here, and some examples that kind of walk you through as you're going. And as we talked about earlier, we have the ability to translate into the different languages. So if you've got a client who speaks Arabic, we've got that here, and we've just got,
This has been
that
fantastic for us, Dinah, on the Afghan cases, right? So the Afghans, we use allies, right? So in the Afghans are almost all in the military or the police, and they had translators that were part of their units, and those translators would be on the calls with us, and then you could flip the question into either the Afghan languages, and then they could see it, and then the translator would help us do it. It really sped up the process, as opposed to having it in English, the translator reading it, the translator then go back and tell them what it is. They could read it with the translator, and then they would say it back in their language, translator helping us kind of cut them in half, right? So we brought this foreign language in recently, and it expedited it significantly on that part. And I can imagine you being in the situation where you bring in somebody that speaks Spanish, that might be talking to an attorney that doesn't, and being there to help them. And in that scenario, they'd be able to see it with you.
Very interesting. And then can we see Spanish just out of curiosity?
Yeah.
So I can read them.
We can see it. Very cool. Yeah. And just to be clear, Gabby and John, so when the attorney, the petitioner files these different fields, later on in the process, not for asylum, but for most cases, when there are USCIS forms that you need to submit, all this information is mapped to it, and you can just export a USCIS form, right?
Much more than that, Pierre. That's what I'm, trying to explain is that, Gabby, you can go to the petitions. Forms are where the rest of them stop. An asylum case is one not on the forms but on the brief. And what we were put in the position of the Afghan cases that were different than the other asylum cases is they had a special asylum category called OAR, Operation Ally Rescue, right? And they said that these asylum cases would get filed within 45 days. So what a lot of asylum attorneys were doing is they'd put in a skeleton case, and then they wouldn't have a hearing for 3-5 years, and then they would augment it, right? There was no opportunity to augment. So we built a brief that was 25 pages long that we could crank out within a matter of weeks, right? And in that brief, you can see it here. Gabby, why don't you go to open the brief there for the Afghan asylum brief right there. Show you an example. So the language on the black is the hard coded part. In the reds it means that it's not filled in. So if you take them through the questions, it'll pre-fill all of that. And then when you see these things to the left, treating mental health professional title and stuff like that, that's because it helps you and reminds you you should probably have somebody helping understand what the damages are and what the exhibits are and all those sorts of stuff. So it walks you through the process, and it's really great because in the way that Diana, you're doing your business, is you could have all this stuff sort of prepped and then bring the lawyer in and say, hey, look, I've talked to him. These are some of the things. What do you think? Right? Give me your professional assessment on whether or not you think this organization is going to be, a political organization, or if they're just a victim of a crime, right? I mean, there's some judgment calls that have to be made by attorneys, but that doesn't mean that the fact finder can't have it already ready for them, right? You can bring the attorney in at different levels in this situation, but this right here, this document is going to print it out. And Gabby, I know we don't have it filled out, but if you build it, it'll show what that brief looks like, and it builds out a Word document for it. And in addition to this, we have templates for the mental health or doctor opinions, witness statements, things like that. So a lot of times they don't know what to write, right? They're doctors, they're treating them, but they don't know what the standard is for asylum. So if they're just saying whatever they think, then it leaves it up for immigration to determine. Did you build that, Gab?
Yes. Sorry, the way I'm sharing, it's just showing my tab.
Yeah,
so
you gotta go away and come back. That's a.
Yeah.
Yep.
1 moment.
Interesting. As they do that, then do you have any questions on what you're looking at? It's an interesting, because we talk a lot about technology and how it will improve the process. Does do these forms look familiar to you?
That's not a form.
No, but the forms that we saw earlier, and then the actual brief.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, and I think made my job more easy and helpful for my clients, helpful for my husband if I had to show you different cases, or for different lawyers when I transferred my case to
Yeah.
different lawyers so they can understand and they can kind of get everything more um, correct
Yeah.
at
You're right. You could
at that
literally bring
moment.
them in.
Great for
Yeah,
collaboration.
You could bring them in because we do it like this every day, right? So you just put them on a screen like this, even if they're not in your office, and then say, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Then you produce it. What we in our system, we can upload it, but we can also email it, right? They can download it, look at it, say, I'd change this, this, and this. You make those changes, you go back to them, you get approval, bam, there you go. Now now see, the funny thing is we're lawyers that want to make our case managers efficient. You can be a case manager that wants to make your lawyers efficient. As long as both are involved in the process, there's no rule that says how much time there needs to be. The lawyer's responsible for it, but if they can have a case manager give them a thing and say, here are the 4 issues I've seen, why don't you validate those things? You can really help them with time. And that is really what time is, what almost all of these case management programs are about, but ours is about the ultimate question, and that is getting a visa approved, right? We don't want to hurry up and lose because we got it done really quickly, but we missed the big thing, right? We put it in there and the issue wasn't identified. So we ran right through it and we just put something together. Immigration's tough, right? They see these things all the time. What we try to do is see what their trends are, where they're going, find that information and put those answers in there. So Gabby, let's go through this brief a little bit. Again, this one hasn't been filled out, so you can see some things in red. These are things that you would make decisions on.
What does red mean, John?
Well, for example, if you scroll up to the top, for the Afghans, they could be a national of Afghanistan, but they may have been stripped of their nationality. So they wrote into the law or no nationality, right? So Afghans that are formerly Afghans would fit into that category. And what you would do is you would just remove a national of Afghanistan, this is a Word document, and just leave no nationality, right? So then if you can see it here, we have some presupposed attachments that helps the attorney know what does it typically look like, and they can change that. If you scroll down a little bit, Pierre or Gabby, sorry. you'll see some double hashtags if you stop right there. So the double hashtag means we didn't fill that out, right? So we're telling them that one of the exhibits that are typical in an asylum case is to have an expert mental health assessment, right? And then obviously if you have that, then that mental health assessor has a name, has a title, has a facility, right? So if you're saying, look, we're not going to do it with a mental health assessment, they don't have a mental health assessment, you can just remove that, right? And then you just relabel. So if you go down a little bit, we lay out, and again, this is a brief, right? So this is, going to be 20 plus law. Let's stop here for a second. 20 pages long, right? So we want to set it up. What is the law? Right. So in this one, this petition's filed under the expedited processing provisions. It puts the regulation. It talks about the what act this are. You can see there in red. It's an OA. It's the OAR, and most of these folks came in on parole. So we put it in red. There might be some instances where they didn't. They may have come in from another country. Whatever may have been there. That's it. And then you can see down there, category 1 and category 2. We're going to answer those questions. Category 1 is that they came in between one period of time. Category 2 is another period of time. Now, I know, Diana, if you haven't done any Afghan asylums, this stuff's all foreign to you. But the other asylums just don't have these questions, but they have other things. It would be under another regulation, and it would talk about how they came in. So let's go a little bit farther.
Very good.
Okay, so the first one is right there under 1. Again, this is a brief, right? It's saying under, so you can see it doesn't have the name, the double hashtags of the beneficiary here. If you collect that information as you would, that's where their name would go. And they complied that they're physically present in the United States when they're filing this, which is a regulation that you have to do. And it's going to do that, right? And then it talks about, if you scroll down, we put the law in here, right? There's amazing how many immigration attorneys, right, don't even quote the law back to immigration. They just say, here's some stuff. Tell us if it's good enough, right? So we want to set the table, right? Here's what the law says. We understand it's our burden of proof. We understand here's what eligibility is. We need to show past persecution, those sort of things, right? Then we go down a little bit. You can see the next argument is the beneficiary. You can see there were name in, has suffered persecution from the Taliban. The reason we put that in is 100% of our Afghan asylum cases are persecuted by the Taliban. There's not one that isn't, right? That's the power base on the other side. They came in when America pulled out, and all of the clients we have. Now, in other countries, it's different groups, right? And so you would talk about who's the persecuting group, what's their name, what's their purpose, sort of things like that. So again, Diana, this is one particular type of asylum case, as you know. And so what we want to do is simplify things where we can. Then what we put in is we talk about the facts, then we have witnesses. A witness is invaluable, right? Is there anybody that can talk about it? One of the things with our Afghans, we had to leave our Afghan translators with this application to then take their laptop. Like all the Afghans were living in apartment complexes clustered together. So we had our guys running around to the different apartment complexes, just sitting down with them in a laptop and taking their witness declarations. We would not have been able to do this if we didn't have this technology. It was a remarkable game saver. And we were able to pull them from different parts of the country. We had attorneys in different parts of the countries doing this. And it was really a great way to use technology to help a lot of people, helping a lot of people at the same time. You can see here, there's the grounds, and then there's a series of grounds. Now, Diana, this might be a little more familiar to you. So in any of the asylums, there's typical grounds, political opinion. With this one, we put in feminism, right? It was really interesting. Stop right there, Gab. It was really interesting that the Taliban weren't just killing for the political opinion of these people that they felt were on the side of the Americans, but the ones on the side of the Americans were bolstering women's rights to have jobs and not be basically servants of the men in their lives, right? So they were declared as feminists, right? We use that as a political opinion. In a lot of these cases, religion wasn't always at play, but there were different sects of Muslim religions in there. Some of them could have been Christians or could have been Jews. We didn't come across any of that, but it would have been national origin, can be really interesting, of different sects, right? So those are all the kind of things that attorneys are going to make judgment calls on, and case managers can bring it, help understand that, and say, okay, to the attorney, which one of these do you think it is? You make the judgment call on it. I'm going to help you find the facts, right? And that's the way that we worked in conjunction with our case managers, which were these translators that were so critical. So fear of persecution, it lays what that is, low standards out, puts case law on it. If we see case law changing, we can drop in new case law and do every brief after that with it. And that's been really, really valuable. When we started the Afghan cases, they're all new, right? Now it's been over a year. Decisions have been coming out. We can cite those decisions, things like that. We can scroll through this a little bit quicker. Past persecution, those are pretty easily to prove in these cases. Why don't we stop there for a second? I'd like to know with Diana what you're seeing on your asylum cases, just to kind of dig into the weeds of asylum. What are the
really
basis?
quick, I'd like to note that we actually are coming up on the end of our time, so we kind of need to start wrapping. It's 11:56. So.
Okay, I think that's great, Gabby. Why don't we leave it to Diana to maybe talk a little bit about her asylum practice, some of the reasons for some asylum, and maybe that can put a bow on it for her, and then we can, let Yeshin have some last words as well.
Do you want me to keep sharing?
Sure, didn't matter.
So I think the presentation is great. I like that program. I think it's going to make my work more easy and efficient for my husband if he is the one who's going to be helping me in the cases. About the claims for asylum, example, the case I was talking about in the past was the asylum claim. It was from Venezuela, and the country is from the same government as the oppressor. So they have the guerrillas, they have the colectivos, who are those people who persecution the just regular people because they don't want to vote for the actual president in Venezuela, the only one president in Venezuela.
Right.
Or I don't know how long. So that is, it just kind of like, I only see the asylum claims, it just only in the Latin countries, and I see like it's kind of the same thing. Like in Colombia, we have the guerrillas, and the persecution is because they want to make the cocaine in the locations where the Indians live, and they want to kind of erase those people from the land to take over, and they force people to work with them, and they force childs to get involved into the guerrillas and teach them how to shoot the guns and kill people. So that's how I see the persecution into the people who come here, running from that life over there. So that's why it made me so happy. I'm here with immigration, and I love to do immigration. It's just something in my heart when I talking about immigration, and I know I can help. And when I cannot help, I just transfer to a lawyer because I know they can live better life here.
That's a fantastic mission that you have, Diana, and I really love that you're helping those folks. It sounds like a horrible situation for them. It must be very scary, and it's amazing how hard life is in some parts of this planet, and that we're, as a nation of law, giving safe haven to them, and it's become a big political issue in our country, whether or not we should do it. And the funny thing is, we're a nation of immigrants. You're a recent one. Yesh is a recent one. Pierre is on his way to be one. I'm a third generation, and Gabby's a fourth generation. But none of us were here originally, and somebody allowed our folks in, or allowed you guys in, and is allowing Pierre in. And there are people in our country that come from immigrants that are like, no more. You guys can't come in, and there is no grounds. There's nothing bad enough that they think it's okay. And that's what asylum is about. If you are suffering from these wrongs, our country of laws will take you in. That's what it's all about. It's one of the best things about America. Really happy that you're on the front lines in helping people like that.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you,
Yeah,
John.
let's have Yes. We haven't got to hear much from her.
Well,
Thoughts in your practice, Yes.
I'll keep it quick. So the portal really helps us, especially with when you're doing like high volume. I can go in there, and I do a lot of H-1Bs, and business-based immigration. So it helps in more of a lot in both sides, humanitarian side of immigration law and the business side, where I can process and knock out petition after petition without compromising quality. And so we have a quality control aspect of this. I can put in my information for an organization and just have that transported into all of my petitions so that I'm not wasting time doing repetitive work. So that way I do it once, the first time I do it right, and then it's just transferred over, which is kind of neat. So it's a really good time saving tool. For both attorneys and case managers. So I can do a strategy for a company, and then John can do a strategy for the company as well. And then basically the attorneys do the broad, here's our plan, this is our plan of attack. And then the case managers can come in and then execute it for each single petition accurately. So that's what's cool about this.
Well, and
About Visas
you
AI.
see it kind of coming conversely as well, because on your corporate clients, right, you have new cases coming in constantly, and then you're seeing it after the case managers put together and may identify an issue in the middle of a case, right?
Right.
We've done that. Yes, you and I worked on one at the end of the last cap where I was on an airplane, and we're all trying to find out what's the right position and salary, right? And because it was an airplane, I was able to use our platform over the internet, and we were able to in ours, Diana, will link to government sites. So we're looking at the OOH for what was the right job, and then we're looking at the FLC data center for the pay. And we went back and forth while looking at this platform, found it out, was able to do it. And what we had deadlines coming up, and
It's very
within days.
collaborative. You can have team members from
Yeah, no,
all
that
around the
was
country
neat.
and
And
all
so
around the
that's,
world to do it.
yeah. And a neat example is the questions can be identified by the case managers and brought to the attorney later. It doesn't always work. The attorney says, here's what we're going to do, and instructs. It many times comes the other way. I need some help on this. Where do I need to go on that? What's the law behind it? What's it going to be? And that collaboration helps get the case approved where it wouldn't be without that other party. So
yeah,
glad you brought that up. Thank you. All right, Gabby, I think we've come to our end, huh?
Yes,
We
we
sure
have.
But just to kind of put a bow on it, Diana, if you're interested in checking out the platform further and seeing how it kind of would align with your practice, I would be your girl. I'm happy to schedule some time where we can really take more of an exhaustive kind of look through it to see if there's any alignment with what you guys are doing. But regardless, we're just really thankful that you were able to take some time out of your busy work week to join us and hear a perspective that we don't often hear. We're usually talking to attorneys, so it's great talking to the the support staff and those who really help keep law firms running.
Front line.
So very thankful for your perspective and what you brought to the table today, and hopefully we can connect soon and we can talk about alignment between our companies.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Thank
Diana.
you.
Great to
Thank
know
you.
you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I want to remind everyone that's watching us that they can join every Friday at the same time. Some questions came in from our live stream, but I think we covered them in different aspects. Actually, a lot more are coming now, but we will be able to answer them next week. Diana, would love to have you again in a few weeks again. That'd be great. And with that being said, have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Good weekend.
Thank you, guys.
Everyone.